during the course of conducting our inquiry, we then set up various structures, such as, for instance, depending on the nature of the case, whether there is no clarity around, there's lack of clarity around the issues of who was there and so on, we may institute a board of inquiry. But in this instance, relevant to these cases I've referred to, only one where we've had a board of inquiry. That is the case which relates to the Costa case. But arising out of that, a court has given us a directive, Honorable Chair, about that the minister should actually issue, together with members of the Defence Force in deployment. We have issued those directives. Not only have we issued them, we've also filed them to the court, which talk to do's, which also talk to don'ts. For instance, if you look at some of the areas, there's the item, scenario 1, looting, that whereas in terms of do's, SANDF members have an inherent right to test self-discipline, defense. You allow members of SAPS to take over, right? That kind of case. You protect the police. If the situation escalates, then as a member of the South African National Defence Force, you look at some of the areas looting with that, whereas this deployment, in terms of do's, SANDF members have an inherent right to shoot self-discipline because they defend it for us to. You allow members of SAPS to get in physical fight with members of the public. So, Chair, I'm just saying you have those directives, but you also go on. There are several of these directives which I can read, like how they conduct themselves in a roadblock, how they conduct themselves in the event of provocation, which is that members must just ignore them to get in physical fight with members of the exercise restraint. That the members must give a verbal warning in the event of provocation. And the which is that members should not get into physical fights with members of the public, and members should not shoot. So these are some of the important things which we are trying to educate our people about, so that people understand it's not as though we've deployed without, there's a code of conduct, by the way, as well. Members of the South African National Defence Force, they have a code of conduct as a way of being, to pledge to serve the Republic, its constitution, etc. And it does say that I serve the SANDF with loyalty and pride as a citizen and a volunteer. That I respect the democratic political processes, and it goes on and on. And that it says, I will not abuse my authority position or public funds for personal gain, political motive, or any other reason. So, members of the public, these are some of the things which members of the public need to know. That we do not just deploy people who are wrong, who do not understand what the do's and don'ts are. They know what the do's and don'ts are. They've actually sworn and pledged to the Constitution of the Republic by adopting the Code of Conduct. So members of the public, in the same way, if a member of the public sees a particular case as that of a criminal nature, the member of the police station so that they investigate that case. I hope I've tried to cover what you were asking, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll now move on to follow-up questions. And I see that the hand of Alak is up, and he'll be but let's start with George Mikalakis. Honorable George.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Minister, I just want to refer back to what you said in the latter part of your answer, and that was that all these directives and oaths and code of conduct is in place. So the members of the SANDF knew exactly what they were doing. So my question to you about pointing that out is that you mentioned in your response that of these investigations, Some of them haven't been formally referred to you. They were released, but they haven't been formally referred to you. If I understood this correctly. My question then is, surely you as the minister have the authority as the political head of the SANDF, when you become aware of such cases, to refer them to the military ombudsman for an investigation. Why have you not used this authority and referred it to them for an investigation, even where a complaint hasn't come from the public? If you're earnest about the fact that these matters need to be dealt with, surely you should not wait for the public to refer it, and surely that should come from you as the political head of the department to request such investigation. That is the case, Minister. Will you commit to do that? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Honorable George. When a case is reported to the police, you allow for the processes of the police to be concluded. If you look at the first case which I talked to, which is that of Esibukeng, those members, I've said, they've since appeared because it was a straightforward matter which everybody saw. Those members have since appeared on negative office orders, which means you appear before your commander, you are duly reprimanded for such behavior, but equally, there's a case of assault which has been lodged with the South African Police Service, and the case number, as I said, is 130-0420. It's not a matter that requires a board of inquiry. It's not a matter which requires a military ombuds, because this matter has, by the time everybody knew, it was already with the police. So we have no problems with that, because it is viewed as people, if you saw, I don't know if you remember the case, that is where a young man was assaulted by officers. So it's a very straightforward case, it's clear. I mean, and that is why we have not referred the matter to the military ombuds. There's a case and the people have been given office orders.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll now move on to Honorable Arnold. Arnold.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Minister, the North Gauteng High Court passed a judgment that berated the country's military and police for their conduct in the enforcement of the nationwide lockdown regulations. And according to the outcome, people need to be able to trust the government to abide by the rule of law, make rational regulations, and not to intrude on the rights of those subject to the law. Now, Minister, can you please indicate, in terms of the deployment of the SANDF, why was there no directives in the first place before the deployment of the Defence Force? Why was there no directives put in place? That is my question.
Thank you very much, Super Peter. Thank you very much, Chairperson. The members, honorable members, the members of the South African National Defence Force, in their training, inherently there are the do's and don'ts, right? So as they go to deployment, whether in a mission area outside of the Republic of South Africa or even here, situation in the Western Cape, as they move in, they know what the do's and don'ts. What we did not do, for the sake of the public to know, is to publish the directives so that all South Africans are aware of what the do's and don'ts are. Otherwise, what you see in these directives is nothing new. It is something which all members of the South African National Defence Force are familiar with. And therefore, hours now, which is what the court ruled, that it is important for the South African public to be aware of what the do's and don'ts of members of the SANDF are. And that is the purpose of this. But of course, it still did not stop us from addressing the members of the SANDF themselves. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next question will come from Honorable Maine Christians. Honorable Christian.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Minister, in light of the answers that you've given and in light of the question, should the consequences be for a SANDF member found guilty of brutality against civilians? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Chairperson, thank you very much. If you are saying what should be, and in the event a member of the SANDF has been found to have carried out a brutal act, I think the law should take its course. In the first instance, one of the things people need to know, because there's always an assumption that because we have a separate judicial military kinds of military justice within the SANDF, it is not everything that you are allowed to deal with. The civilian courts should deal, for instance, if you look at issues like murder, rape, etc., those kinds of issues, those are issues which are taken courts in South Africa, because in the first instance, even the investigation is police. However, if something happens relevant to issues of discipline within the SANDF, but also in deployment outside of the Republic of South Africa, then those matters are handled by the military judicial. I would say that I do not want to make an assumption on things, but I would say that I would not be to do that in the event a matter is investigated and is taken to a court of law. Let the courts be the one that be a suitable penalty for such action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable members will now proceed to the next question, and that is question number 46, asked by Honorable Ryder. Honorable Ryder, sorry, Honorable Minister first.
Thank you. Thank you. Chairperson, the question 46 about military equipment in Turkey. All arms trade, Chairperson, between South Africa and any other country is processed through the National Conventional Arms Control Committee, the NCACC, which is a committee of cabinet chaired by a minister consisting of other ministers. This is a structure that was established by the National Convention's Arms Control Act of 41 of 2002. As I said, it's chaired by a minister. Therefore, and the minister in this instance is the minister in the presidency. Therefore, all information and related work of the committee is processed through the chairperson of the committee. And I should say that, Chair, before matters are presented to the committee, all matters are subjected to scrutiny by a scrutiny committee. Scrutiny committee consists of director generals or any other delegated person by that department to be part of the scrutiny committee. The Secretary of Defense is also part of the scrutiny committee. And then they scrutinize the entire list of experts presented before the NCACC. And the NCACC always receives advice before it takes a decision. If we're not sure about what direction to take on a particular matter, there's always state security, which advises us about the political situation of that country. There's always defense intelligence. There's always the most Department of International Relations, which then advises the NCACC whether we can give arms to a particular country or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Ryder, any follow-up question?
Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, if I may, it's Honorable
No,
Mr.
no, Honorable Mikalakis. If you want to speak, you indicate, and you use raise your hand so that you can then note you point of order, whatever. Please do not do. Before you speak, I must give you permission to do so. I see. Sorry, Honorable Mikalakis. I've just received information here that indicates that we are taking over the role of Honorable Ryder. So please proceed. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. You know me as an ordinary member, and I was really trying to assist. Chairperson, thank you very much. My follow-up question to the Minister is, Minister, Egypt has recently indicated Turkey-based forces in Sidra in Libya. If Turkey actually takes action in Sidra in Libya, do you realize that by trading arms with Turkey, South African weapons will most likely then be used in a conflict? Thank you very much.
Honorable members, South Africa has approved, indeed transferred to Turkey in terms of Section 15 of the NCACC Act. Currently, Chairperson and honorable members, there are no impediments in law to trade with Turkey in terms of our Act. In terms of the provision of the Act, as I said earlier on, there's always careful analysis and consideration which is done before granting any approval. The NCACC has applied the criteria as well as other policy considerations in order to give effect to the provisions of the law. I hear you saying if the arms which went to Turkey are likely to be used. I don't want to make that kind of prediction, but if the information, your intelligence talks to that, other than a threat made by Egypt, if your information talks to that, then let's talk about it when it happens. But for now, there is nothing preventing us from trading with Turkey. There isn't even an arms embargo which has been announced with regards to Turkey.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next supplementary question will come from Honorable Ndongeni. Honorable Ndongeni.
Thank you, Chair. In view of aging military equipment in the country, I'm sorry, Minister, is whether in view of aging military equipment in the country, government has considered a possibility of procuring military equipment. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Minister.
Well, Chairperson, it is a new question, but I will make the point that, Chairperson, that everybody, it is now common knowledge that South Africa's national health, and therefore we are presented with a situation where we must reprioritize our programs. I know that people will say the defense review, for instance, of 2015 talks to arresting the decline of the capabilities of the South African National Defense Force. Yes, we're trying to do whatever is feasible with what we have, but for now we are reprioritizing. And our point of our, we may not be able to equip ourselves in the manner in which we would have wished to. But what is important is that it is not as though it is an army which is defenseless. But our aging equipment, it is a reality that it needs to be, we need to do something about it. But this is not the time, because unfortunately, the finances of the country are not doing well. We will use what we already have. Thank you. And what has been already ordered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to the Minister. Minister, Turkey also supplies weapons to groups involved in the conflict in Syria. Would you be therefore supporting a blanket embargo on the state of weapons to Turkey on the basis of protecting human rights? Thank you.
Sorry, Honorable Chairperson, the Honorable Member kept on, there are some parts of the question which I didn't get. I'm sorry.
Now I'll ask Honorable Bishop to please repeat the question again. And be a bit slower, Honorable Bishop, so that your words are not lost.
Okay, Chair, I would also, with due respect, request the Minister not to fiddle with her papers whilst we're asking questions.
How can I not
I will repeat it again. I will repeat it again. Turkey, Minister, also supplies weapons to groups involved in conflict in Syria. Are you therefore in support of a blanket embargo on the sales of weapons to Turkey on the basis of protecting human rights? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, you are saying, am I in support of a blanket embargo? I did not talk about supporting a blanket embargo against Turkey. But as I said earlier on, before you grant any export permit, one of the things you do is to look at the political situation of that country. You receive advice about the geopolitics in that area and whether, in fact, the decision you are about to take is likely to compromise the people of that country. Now, in the case of Turkey for now, and I should say this, that we took the decision at the NCACC, right? And we had advice and we discussed it because we are a committee of ministers and agreed that there would be no reason why we should not sell arms to Turkey.
Yes. You are done, Minister, I guess.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Malika. The next supplementary question will come from Honorable A. Malika.
Oh, thank you, Chairperson. My question to the Minister is whether the department will publicly inform South Africans what its military equipment are and when it's planned to procure same.
Thank you, honorable members. Well, let me say, firstly, the challenges of the capabilities of the Defence Force are known. As I made reference earlier on to our Defence Review of 2015, which talks exactly to that challenge. So they are known. So obviously, when the time comes for certain things to be done, the Portfolio Committee and the Joint Standing Committee on Defence of Parliament will know, because those are the two structures we interact with on a regular basis. And therefore, when information is requested for us to provide to those structures, we will do so. So then the South African public will know what it is that Defence Force is procuring or not. But I don't want to entertain any illusion. The reality of the South African situation right now is such that we will not be able to procure any armaments for now. And that, yes, what we will probably receive is what already had been ordered in the past few years. But it is practically impossible to talk about expanding in that area by way of procuring new things. We will make do with what we already have, because after all, it does not, the fact that we have challenges as a country and as the South African National Defence Force does not mean that our Defence Force will be unable to defend the country if they were to be called upon to do that against any threat.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next question is question number 23, asked by Honorable Ntube, directed to the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. As I indicated earlier, in question number 1, which was on the order paper, this more or less is the same question, that there are 3 cases involving members of the SANDF where civilians are involved, which have been reported during lockdown. Yes, people may look at this and say, but that's a small number compared to what they have seen. But what you see on social media sometimes is not necessarily what is happening on the ground. Then, of course, there is the COSA matter, Chair, which is the matter I did not talk to earlier on, but I will talk to it because there are 3 kinds of investigation which are currently going on there. First investigation was the Board of Inquiry. The second one is the one of the joint investigating team between the police and the military police, South African Police Service and the military police. And the third one is this is a case which has been tabled before the military ombuds, and the military ombuds is dealing with the matter. And just to say, as you are aware, the case has also been to court already, not for charges, no, active that any of the people who were around that area on the day when this incident happened should be suspended, which we have done, where we were then directed to issue those directives. As I said, the other case is the Sibukeng case. That case has been reported to the police as a criminal case, which it has a case number. So there was also no need for us to convene any board of inquiry because it is a straightforward matter which everybody saw, which is being investigated by the police. Then the case of Kaitomana, there too, that there is a case number there, which is 45/04/20, which is with the South African Police Service. Then the Northwest case, which involves the 2 SANDF members, which too is with the South African Police Services because of Salayo, the military men and women are part of our society, and therefore for any kind of criminality are accountable to the civilian courts. And therefore even the investigations would be conducted by the South African Police Services. And that is the Northwest case which I am now referring to. Now, all of these cases are cases which are receiving attention, but as I say earlier on, you can't run each time you see something on social media, then you believe it. Somebody has to come forward and say, indeed, what you have seen on social media happened in my community or in my vicinity, and I have come to report the case. And you have a right to report the case to the police. You have a right to report the case to the may actually approach has a right to approach the military ombuds to then investigate the case, just to make a determination in the first instance whether indeed there is a matter to be investigated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Nsube, any follow-up question?
Can I just raise a point of order?
Yes. What's the point of order?
My point of order is, Chairperson, you did not recognize the EFF member that his hand was up with the previous question, but you didn't recognize him. I'm just indicating to you, please make sure that you recognize our members when their hands is up on the system.
Yeah, Honorable member, please let us know if your member wants to speak, and you can raise your hand function there. Remember what to speak. Let me also say to you, in addition to that, I'm also assisted by a team of people around me here, and indeed what we are saying is not recorded anywhere in the process that we're dealing with now. Please indicate you want to speak. Indicate accordingly, you'll be recognized.
Chair.
Honorable Chair. Can I find out if you...
Chair. Point of order, Chair.
Who's asking a point of order?
Yes, it's Honorable PLENARY.
Yes,
just in line with what Honorable Ronald was saying, that I actually raised my hand. You said we have to raise the raise your hand function. Yes. And I did raise my hand. You have to look at that. I'm just appealing for consistency. So that going forward, we may not seem as if we are interrupting you when we're speaking.
Okay, now we'll try. I will then try our best to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. Please keep on alerting us. We'll do our utmost to ensure that we're not denying opportunity to speak. Honorable Nsube, any follow-up question?
Indication on Nsube, Chairperson, is the Chief Whip here. Honorable Sheikh is standing in. Nsube is locked out of the system. Technical challenge. Thanks, Chair.
Can we have Sheikh speaking? Honorable Sheikh? I now call on Honorable Sheikh to raise a follow-up question. It does seem as if we have a problem, and given this situation, we will move ahead. We'll ask the table once again to please assist members who can't log in or who can't articulate whatever they need to communicate, whatever it is. Please assist. Yes, Sheikh?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chair, we welcome the swift reaction by the President and Ministry to release soldiers to help in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And my question to the Minister is whether the department has instituted charges internally to discipline members who violated the rights of South Africans during.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, yes. Earlier on, Chair, I went through each one of the cases and what has been done. What matters and which is important for all people who have been violated felt that the matter is a criminal matter and therefore should be reported to the South African Police Services. South Africans have done that. Not only that, what we do then is to monitor what happens. The only case which we have, besides, which is a case where we've had to establish a board of inquiry, is the case which relates to the COSA matter in Alexandra. And as I have outlined earlier on, you have 3 different entities which have been working on that case because of the seriousness of the allegations which have been made. So on any of the other matters, we do have investigations currently going on, case numbers, which will then, the civilian courts will then make a determination as to, in their adjudication, whether the people are guilty or not. But where we know that people have not carried themselves in a proper way, they've been subjected to negative orders. And this is what I have negative orders. It's like being given a warning for misconduct. And you appear before your commander and your commander read to you your negative orders. So we may not have done sufficiently or maybe, but I think where wrong has been picked up, we have acted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. We'll now move on to the following supplementary questions. Tia Pleni, M. Khai, and G. Mikalakis. So we'll start with the Pleni. Honourable Pleni. Honourable Pleni from the EFF. Let's start with M. Khai. Honourable Khai.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Just on the case that is before the ombudsman or ombudsperson, Honourable Minister, are there any timeframes with regard to the process as well as the outcome of the investigation by the ombudsman? Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. If everything had been done properly from the beginning, by now we should be having a report of the military ombuds. The reason why I am saying if we had done everything correctly, it is because initially the case was not initiated by the Office of the Minister. Initially, the case was initiated by an honorable member, but the honorable members did not furnish the necessary details. So when we picked this up, then the ombuds wrote to me to say, Minister, please give us an instruction to carry out because we are not getting the details of the case. So can you initiate then a process? So the minister then initiated a process. We are hoping that by the time honorable members come back from recess, that report will be readily available and that report will be presented to the minister. Report will then be given to the directives to the chief of the SANDF to implement whatever recommendations which will come out of that process from the Office of the Military Ombuds. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Mikalakis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, you are on record for saying at the end of April that the military ombuds is currently investigating 33 cases of human rights abuses. Minister, that's 33 cases of human rights abuses against South African citizens by members or soldiers within your department. 33. It's not a once-off case, Minister, and it's really not a small number. I think you would agree with me. In light of the fact that it's not an isolated case and that it seems to be a tendency and a bigger problem within the SANDF, surely you as the political head need to take some responsibility or at least some decisive action to address this, because the human rights abuses by your department, of which you are the political head, against South African civilians can surely not continue. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Member. Obviously, I am the executive authority in the department. And you know, Honorable Members, anything that happens to members of our society, if there is any wrong, as everybody who's associated with that structure, including yourselves, Honorable Members, you get ashamed, you get embarrassed. And I must say that when the allegations have emerged, I have actually I'm on record as having made a statement to the effect that we do not accept instances where law enforcement agencies abuse power. I'm on record as having said that, not once. Even when the matter of the COSA case, even though there hasn't been an investigation that gives us a finding as to who should be accountable for this case, I am still on record as having said, on behalf of the South African government, we hang our heads in shame for what has happened, for a loss of life. So I don't think, an impression should be created that we do not take responsibility. We take responsibility. We make these statements because we do take responsibility for whatever action, whether good or bad. When it is good, we are able to stand up and say you have done well. But when they have not done well, we are able to stand up and sometimes condemn them even before we have verified the facts around a particular matter. So I am singling out the case in particular because it is a matter of interest right now in South Africa, and it is a matter which relates to a death of a human being, and therefore it's necessary for me to indicate to honorable members and to South Africans through you that at some point we said a board of inquiry has completed its work, and that's it. Does not mean that this case is not receiving attention. This case is receiving attention from 3 different entities, which is namely your board of inquiry, your military ombuds, and of course the last one, which is the joint investigation conducted by the military police and the South African Police Services. It is a very important matter, and I should say that we have expressed empathy with the families, and in particular, this family, the COSA family, what happened to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Can we revert back to Honorable Apleni? Honorable Apleni of the EFF.
Chairperson, Member Apleni's hand was not up for this question. It was for the previous question. So you can move, Jay.
Okay, no, thank you very much. We'll raise your hand function. That's why I wrote it down. Now, thank you very much. We'll proceed to the next question, honorable members. And the question is question number 8, asked by Honorable Msamai to the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members. The DMV, Department of Military Veterans, has been facilitating for provision of food parcels to qualifying military veterans in various provinces, including, amongst others, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, where there is the highest concentration of military veterans. The program started in May following the adoption of the COVID-19 implementation plan for military veterans by the Council on Defense. The plan includes, among others, facilitating the payment of the 350 grant by SASSA, and of course, a top-up from the Department of Military Veterans. An amount of 15 million rands has been set aside for this, and we are targeting over 4,000 most vulnerable, and I want to repeat this, most vulnerable military veterans who, according to SASSA and DMV assessments, are most likely to qualify. That is 4,000. The plan also includes facilitating of job and business empowerment opportunities for military veterans. Chairperson, the first batch of 50 military veterans who qualify according to the established criteria on the poverty grant have been approved by SASSA. We work closely with SASSA, and everything that we do must be informed and be in line with what SASSA does for other South Africans. And it's currently being paid $850 top up now in June. Additional 450 military veterans are currently being processed for this payment. A joint task team composed of SASSA, Social Development, and the Military Veterans Association and the Department of Military Veterans has been set up to coordinate implementation and fast tracking of the implementation of the plan.
Thank you very much, Honorable Samai. Any follow-up question?
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to ask the Minister, Chairperson, what criteria they are using to provide the military veterans food parcels, because when you go to Golden Garden, military veterans have never benefited anything. When you also go to
Honorable Minister, Honorable Samai, can we please get back to you? Try to finish up your question. Honorable Samai?
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Yes. I'm done, man.
Thank you for listening that.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Samai. The criteria which has been used is obviously in the first instance that your name should appear on the database of military veterans, irrespective of which association you come from. If it is proven that you are a military veteran, your name appears with your force number on the database of military veterans, then that's criteria number one, you have met it. But as I said earlier on, we are trying right now to assist those military veterans who are the most destitute. I would not deny if you are saying that there's an area called Golden, but if it has not been covered, it is not as though the relief which we are providing will not reach the military veterans in that area. That in the work that we are doing, we are partnering with organizations. For instance, we are partnering with ISASA, as I have said. We are also partnering with the organization of military veterans named SANVA, because that's another organization which is very critical stakeholder, which verifies information and assists us to collect information on the ground about the state of affairs and of military veterans.
No, thank you very much, Minister. We'll now move on to supplementary question both of Honorable Christian.
Yeah, Chairperson, thank you very much. Minister, when the identified veterans pass away, is any of that assistance then transferred to any kind of those deceased veterans identified? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dango. Honorable Dango, one of the critical issues which we are currently discussing right now between ourselves, veterans, is generally extending the benefits beyond the military veterans. But it's clear at this point in time, we will not be able to extend all benefits. But I'm specifically making reference here to the benefit which relates to health. That's besides the benefits, educational benefits, where your dependents do access. But now, on this one of the burial, that support is just given to the family for them to bury the military veterans. For now, we have not extended the benefit for the burial of members of family of the military veteran. However, with regards to the issue of health right now during COVID, one of the issues we are confronted with, for instance, let's say if you are tracing, you are doing in the course of tracing by the Department of Health, they find that there's a military veteran who must be screened and tested. And when you get to that place, I've been told by some of the medical personnel from the South African Military Health Services that you get to a house, of course the veteran does not live alone, of course the veteran has a family, and obviously to extend the services to the dependents of military veterans, because you can't just test the veteran and walk away. You test the family as well, so that and you provide whatever assistance necessary. So with regards to burial, I'm sure there will come a time when we would probably have to do that. But for now, and education in the main, and of course, so very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Chair. We are all aware that there is a register for the military veterans. To give us an indication as to where your department stands with this register and to give organization thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair, there was never of military veterans. There is a register of military veterans on the database, which is a database within the Department of Military Veterans. But what has been contentious has been whether in that, on the database, in other words, in that register, is in fact, I should say this, that the database of military veterans stems directly from the CPR. In other words, all of the people who have been through military service, whether statutory or non-statutory members, forces, where names have been submitted to the Department of Military Veterans and are proven to be military veterans, then their details are included on the database of the Department of Military Veterans. As I say, honorable members, what at times has arisen is not that there is no register, has been whether in fact all the people, all the names we have on that register are in fact verified members of military veterans organizations. Now, what we in terms of their history, not necessarily whether you are a member of an association or organization or not. If you are a military veteran, you qualify to register as such as a military. As far as I'm concerned, of course, I'm sure you must be aware, Chair, that there is currently a process within DMV called process, so that we make sure that the only people who remain on that database are people who do have force numbers. And if you don't have a force number, but you are proven to be a military veteran, let's get information which proves that you are a military veteran so that you can then be included on the database. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now move over to Honorable Christian.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Christian.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Minister, the department's website has for the past year and a half displayed a notice of no new applications for military veteran status. That no military veteran status will be accepted until further notice. In fact, if I could show the Honorable Minister, if I could read it to the Honorable Minister, it says on the application, on the website, applications to be registered onto the military veterans database have been closed until further notice. We apologize for the inconvenience. This has been like this for the past year and a half. Can the Minister please clarify this for us? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will respond to that as Chairperson. One of the issues we have raised both in the Portfolio Committee and in the Joint Standing Committee on Defense is the fact that suddenly we have a rise of numbers amongst military veterans. So every day now you get, particularly after the establishment of the Department of Military Veterans, you have people applying to have their names on the register. Nothing wrong with that. But at times, as people apply, people are unable to even provide you with the force number. So indeed, even in the department, it is carrying information about people who are saying they are military veterans. And all of those, with regards to the new applications, unlike what was done with what we already have on the database, we said before you put all of that information on your database, you've got to verify backlog of verification of military veterans. So yeah, it's more to do with we want you to come forward, but please come forward with complete information, where you were, etc., so that we don't have to embark on another process of verification and look for people who may know the person or not. Come with information which is credible, which will allow us to register you, because there are benefits now involved in this. This is money which belongs to the taxpayers of South Africa, money belonging to the state. So whatever it is that we give out, we must be certain that we are doing the right thing. Check, thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. Honorable members, just to be reminded, there are only 4 supplementary questions allowed. In this instance, the first supplementary question was Mutsamai, followed by Dango, followed by Boshoff, and finally Christian. So Honorable Matebula will not be able to ask a supplementary question. Just to emphasize, honorable members, what I said at the beginning of the sitting. Only 4 supplementary questions are allowed per question. Only 4 supplementary questions. A member who has asked the initial question will be the first to be afforded an opportunity to ask a supplementary question. So on that note, we'll move on to the next question. And this is question 22, asked by Honorable Chabendin, directed to the Minister. Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Member. The investigation into the crash of a South African Air Force aircraft at Goma Airport in the Democratic Republic of Congo is still underway. And of course, it is, albeit in a very advanced stage. The outstanding matters are the following: that the wreckage, but also damage to civil infrastructure and or property and emergency fire and rescue services report from Goma Aviation Authority. Now, these reports are required to address the terms. There have been difficulties to the Aviation Authority. So it's not a matter which we can handle on our own. Remember, it happened in another country. The recovery process is underway, Chair. The aircraft has been defueled. The avionics and electronics. So it's not going to be about just getting everything out and bringing it to South Africa. We have been picking up the essentials for the critical elements of that C-130, and we've brought them into South Africa. So the process is indeed underway. The second phase, of course, will be the recovery team that is finalized now. The recovery process. Now, I'm not sure but the duration of the process is determined by Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Shaik.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you, Minister, for your reply. But Minister, in light of the response from yourself, are there any plans by the department to replace the aircraft to beef up its military work? Thank you.
Are there any plans to replace this particular aircraft?
Yes, sir.
No, no, Honorable Member, Chairperson, through you. For now, there is no intention whatsoever to replace this aircraft. But of course, over the years, Chairperson, South Africa does require a strategic airlift capability. We have very limited capacity, if any at all. And therefore now, in view of the challenges which are currently facing the country and therefore the impact on the South African National Defence Force and the Department of Defence, it's going to be very difficult for us to request for another aircraft. We have not even made the point because we are aware of the challenges of the country and how they impact on the work that we do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister Labuschagne. Honorable Labuschagne.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Minister said that there's no plans to recover the plane at this stage, but I would like to know that aim to replace the C-130 model of aircrafts because they were in use since 1963 and it's becoming increasing cost to maintain them. And does she plan to form to have discussions with Treasury? She says she replied and says in future. How long is that future go?
Thank you very much. I think the issue that's being raised here is more about whether we will buy an aircraft or not to replace this aircraft. And I've responded by saying, for now, the Defence Force and even the government has no intention of providing any funding to the Defence Force for us to replace this aircraft. One of the reasons why we want this recovery of this aircraft, we want the remains to see what it is that we can do on the advice of those who specializes in these matters. Now, I did say earlier on that on the 23rd, we should have had a team. I'm aware that, in fact, the other team which had gone to the DRC, which was supposed to leave now, is on quarantine, preparing to go, hopefully now during lockdown, level 3, that they will be able to depart for Goma, so that they everything and bring it back. But as for buying, I don't want honorable members to mislead the House by suggesting that there may be an opportunity created for the Defence Force to replace this aircraft. For now, it doesn't look like. And I think there are several priorities which are there. And I know that, and I appreciate honorable members, you mentioning that in fact, the age of some of the aircrafts which we are having, they are very old. But the reality is that old as they are for now, for during this period, we will not be able as the Defence Force to replace this specific aircraft with a new one. Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you very much. Honorable George Mikalakis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, I think the point that is being made here is that you sit with aircraft that's been actually used by the SANDF since 1963. So the older the aircraft, the more expensive it also becomes to service them. But on the other hand, you also sit with a problem that you stand in the back when it comes to funding from Treasury. So you are in a catch-22 whilst the capabilities of our Air Force is going backward, despite the fact that we have excellent pilots. Because of the financial constraints, you're in a bit of a catch-22. You've got old aircraft that's becoming expensive to service, and you can't acquire new ones. And that's for you as the minister to come up with an answer for us between yourself and your colleagues in the Department of the Treasury. But Chairperson, when you speak of, Minister, what I want to focus on is the inquiry. It's been taking more, you indicated what the holdup is. Can you please tell us who is on the board of investigation in this matter? And did you give them a time frame by which this investigation needs to be finalized? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairperson. Board of Inquiry was initiated by the Chief of the South African National Defence Force. That's the first thing. The second matter, we anticipated that the Board of Inquiry would take about 6 months to get the initial information, but we never anticipated, we never entertained the notion that, everything would have been done by the end of the 6 months. But to collate the initial information relevant to the crash, we knew that in 6 months we would be in a position to have a picture of what actually transpired. Remember, the investigation is not being done from here. It is being done from the people go to the DRC to collect information. There is also, as I said earlier on, information which is outstanding from the authorities of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But as if that was not enough, Chairperson, then the COVID hit us. And when the COVID hit us, I recall that the actual lockdown, 26th of March, then there was no movement in and out of the country at all, including for the military, except for very essential goods built from other countries who would have come to pick them up. So we are hoping that now that we are at level 3 and gradually moving to open up the economy, that all of this work of, for instance, the shipment of the remains of the aircraft will be done. And that hopefully the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo will also see the urgency of providing us with the information which we have requested. It's not, Chair, I think we should all appreciate it's not as straightforward an inquiry. It's not as easy because you have various stakeholders who are involved in it. Thank you very much, Chair. Chairperson. Chair.
I don't see the chairperson there. I suppose Honorable Gillian is the next one that want to take a follow-up question, if I'm correct.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, my question to the Honorable Minister this morning is whether the department has visited the affected families and whether such families have been given the necessary support. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, we actually have no choice. When any accident occurs, immediately, the first people to move to inform the family, it is the office of the Chaplain General. So the Chaplain General immediately gives a directive to a chaplain where that member, to the unit where the member belongs, to immediately visit the family, firstly to break the news so that people don't get information from social media or even from other sources. So in the event where death occurs, that's what you do. In the event where people are injured, especially if it happens outside of the borders of the Republic of South Africa, we could have an obligation, obviously, immediately to let people know that your loved one was involved in this, but you shouldn't worry, everything is okay. So, as for provision of support, within the South African Military Health Services, Honorable Member, I'm sure you are aware that we do have psychologists, we do have social workers, and as you know, the mandate of the South African Military Health Services is to look after the health of the personnel of the Department of Defense. And therefore, Honorable Member, once something of this magnitude happens and there is need for therapy for members of family, social workers from the South African Military Health Services and the psychologists from the South African Military Health Services move in and provide whatever support is necessary for the families of the affected. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move to the next question, and this is question number 47, asked by Honorable Ryder to the Minister.
Question number 47, report on Honorable Member. I do not want to use the term which is that as though we're running away from this matter is subject, but in fact, earlier on, because excesses committed by law enforcement agencies, this issue was, I don't want us out, rather plead with all of us that we do not go into the merits of the case, but that it should be sufficient to make the point to investigate the circumstances surrounding what happened, who are given the directive to investigate the matter, that there is a team consisting of the police, which is investigating by the court, that we were also direct from any entity who was implemented. We have done that. So I do want to say that another really the second head, and I'm sure by that time we'll also be getting a report conducted on the perception of things, and I am it's a matter which continues to be investigated. Available. We will present the report.
Minister, Honorable George.
Thank you very much, Chair. Honourable Minister, we have on good authority reason to believe that only SANDF staff were consulted during this process. No eyewitnesses, no family. Could you, as the Minister, give us an undertaking that this was not the case? And if it was the case, could you give us a further undertaking that you will make sure that a proper investigation is done and that all the parties involved will actually be consulted and that it will be done in a fair way? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson and Honourable Member. Honourable Member. Mine is to wait, and all of us, for the outcome of the investigation. And once we are presented with a report, then obviously we have a responsibility to actually look at the report and raise whatever questions necessary for us to raise. What I do not want to talk to is the investigation as it is currently going on. I don't even know that indeed the only consultation, the SANDF, that's not the report I have. But what is important for honorable members, because this report will be a public report, it will be a public document. So all of us will have the opportunity to scrutinize the report, to raise whatever questions necessary to those who have been investigating the case. And I'm sure when the report comes out, it will also be giving guidance to all of us as to what is to be done beyond the investigation by the police. But if the members will be charged, that determination will be made by those who are investigating the matter. It's not a determination which can be made by me. I depend strictly on law enforcement agencies to use their professional skills to get to the bottom of the case and make some findings and make proposals to all of us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, we respect your wishes and we understand that the investigation is still on its way and being conducted and so forth, but it is something that's been on the minds and the lips of the whole of South Africa because it was a brutal attack. And what I would like to know from you is that should the finding be that SANDF was indeed at fault for killing an innocent civilian, what responsibility will the real commander-in-chief and yourself as the political head of the Defence Force be taking to ensure that justice prevails? Thank you.
Members, I don't think any one of us have a choice of what to do and what not to do. When an investigation has been conducted and there's a clear outcome of that investigation and there are recommendations about what needs to be done, ours would be to implement the recommendations because the people who are investigating the matter are people who are well-skilled, well-schooled in the area of investigations of an incident of a criminal nature. So they would be the experts. And then, of course, I would imagine that they would be working closely with the National Prosecuting Authority once they have completed that investigation. I am not the one to say once the report or where the report is, whether people have been called in and so on. I can only talk to this matter when the report is out. And once the report is out, obviously, even, I mean, you were asking what the National Commander in charge will do. He would have to do what is being recommended by the law enforcement agencies and support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chairperson. Ke batla go botsa minister ra hore batho ba rona ba batla go tshepa masole, ba batla go tshepa le maponesa. A o kila tsa matsapa a ho ya kwa Bokhoza go ba tshepisa le go ba bolella gore ba tla tswela le bone ka mo ngwana bona a boleweng ke masole ka teng. Ke dikgato di feng tsa ditsereng o go ya go bone go bua le family. Ke a leboga.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Ndate Mtsamai. Yes, the Defense Force has interacted. I did not personally, but I assigned the Chaplain General to visit the family, firstly, Husamatsidiso of the Defense Force and government of the Republic of South Africa, but also to see the state of affairs in the family, whether they would need any kind of support as they were preparing to bury. And not because Ndate Mutsamai, we were taking responsibility, hori, kaniti masole ana ayetsile ntweni. But butu fela hori, and that is what, as the Defense Force, we have done. We are all waiting for the outcome their investigation later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question, honorable members, is question 4, number 4, to the Minister. This is a written question transferred to oral reply in accordance with Rule 24249. Reply in accordance with Rule 249. Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, honorable members. The South African National Defense Force makes use of the following measures to prepare members for employment in operations such as the current one, COVID-19. Mission readiness training, operational law training, including search and seizure, arrest and publication of minimum force, and training on the interpretation of the regulations. Also, honorable members, note that members deployed has the same powers and duties as those conferred upon by SAPS C Section 21 of the Defense Act of 2002. The SANDF has its own operational directives, which becomes operational instructions, which leads to operational orders. These instruments are in line with the SAPS operational directives as the SANDF functions in support of the South African Police Service internally here. The SANDF members have the same powers and duties as the SAPS members, as you know. And of course, then the SANDF reports whenever called upon to the Joint Standing Committee on Defense, the Portfolio Committee on Defense. There is what is called the Civilian Oversight, which is your arm in the Defense Force called the Secretary of Defense. There is your military ombuds, who has the responsibility to investigate. So civilian oversight also should assure South Africans that in the event things were to go horribly wrong, certain things will be done because we do have good civil military relations. Even when you look at some of the structures we work with, much as we are a Department of Defense that has the Civilian Secretariat and the SANDF, but we also work with other civilian institutions because the matter of civilian military relations is something which we emphasize all the time. You see that in some of the countries, for instance, that people will have a general at the helm of the South African, of their defense force as a minister. But in the case of South Africa, deliberately so, our constitution makes the determination that the president, who's the commander-in-chief, will appoint from members of parliament a civilian who will then be charged with the responsibility of political responsibility over the Department of Defense. So the matter of civil military thing which we treasure, it is something which we always wish to highlight because the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa talks to a very clear mandate for the South African National Defense Force. We are not the old Defense Force, the South African Defense Force, which had no relations with civilians, but the only relations they had with civilians was that of murdering civilians. So the whole area, in fact, even as they go through their training, our soldiers, they do go through this curriculum, which includes civil military relationships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sleku. Any follow-up question?
Thank you very much, Chair. Mphathiswa, mandibulise Minister, I've been listening to you from the inception that trying to explain to us what the members of the South African National Defense Force go through in terms of training and how to handle civilians and how to conduct themselves. But unfortunately, Minister, it's what we have been seeing in these last few days. It's actually unbecoming of members in uniform, because for a member in uniform to actually be accused of alleged to have killed a member of the public during a pandemic of like the lockdown. And my question would be, we would expect the same conduct when they are within our borders, because your members are not only deployed for peacekeeping effort for the region. So we don't see what they do there. But currently what we see when they're within our borders, would expect them to conduct themselves, as members of worthy of the uniform. So my question would be, are there reported cases of brutality during non-combat deployment during COVID-19 and the national lockdown isolated, or are other incidents of brutality during peacekeeping deployments being unreported, or are they not being investigated? Thank you very much.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Actually, incidents of brutality in the South African, or allegations of brutal incidents in the Defense Force in deployment areas, it's something which you hardly hear about. If there's anything which is unfortunately cases which we get maybe at times on a regular basis, is incidents of sexual exploitation and abuse. SIA cases. Brutality is, I think we've had one incident where there was a reference to a brutal act. The rest of the cases which we have from outside of the borders of the Republic of South Africa in mission areas in TRC and on the borderline have to do really with issues of sexual exploitation and abuse. And in this instance, I would not categorize those as brutality, but I would say these are incidents of abuse because when you are called upon to protect civilians, you are not expected to take advantage of the vulnerability of those civilians. They depend on you for protection, and therefore, even when you enter into a sexual relationship with civilians, it becomes exploitation because you're taking advantage of a vulnerable human being who looks up to you as a man or woman in uniform for protection. As for brutality are cases which really we never receive, we never have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's go to George Milakis, to be followed by Honorable Malika.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable Minister, earlier you said that when these incidents happen against civilians, that you are embarrassed by it. Now, with great respect, Honorable Minister, that answer is embarrassing because mere embarrassment is not good enough. You're sitting with families who have lost a loved one, an innocent loved one, for no good reason, simply because there's a toxic culture within the army that has no respect, and I'm not saying it's all soldiers, I'm saying there's a toxic culture among some soldiers that there's no respect for the lives of South African civilians. That is not a training issue, as you've mentioned. They're being trained, they are informed, they know exactly how they are supposed to interact with civilians. That is a leadership problem, and you are the leader. And with great respect, I don't think that the public is going to be so kind in accepting the answer that I'm embarrassed and we're dealing with it in terms of investigations as a reply. The problem is not that they are being investigated. The problem is that these cases happen in the first place. And I haven't, in the 3-4 questions that deals with this issue, I've heard a lot about investigations that drag on. I haven't heard a single word on what is being done by you as the political leader to prevent these incidents. And if you indicate to me now what you are in fact doing to prevent these incidents, I can tell you now already that what you are doing is not good enough. Because 33 cases of human rights abuses in this country against innocent civilians is frankly unacceptable. And it's a leadership problem, not a training problem. So what are you as the leader going to do differently from what you've been doing up to now to make sure that these cases do not increase? My personal suggestion is for you to step down, but I would like to know what you would suggest would be an appropriate option. There's the Chief Whip coming to your rescue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll welcome you if you were to submit the 33 cases to me, please. I would welcome that if you were to give me the 33 cases. But the second matter is I don't know what else one needs to say to demonstrate to you, to the South African public, through you as an honorable member, the steps which we have taken. You can't make presume a person guilty. You presume a person innocent until you've conducted all your investigation and the person is found guilty. I can't make a presumption that all and everything which is brought to me, the people are guilty, and therefore there is no need for an investigation. An investigation in any situation is necessary to make a determination whether the person is indeed guilty or not. But the other thing which I think we need to, you're not talking about, Honorable Member, is, you know, we have the responsibility as members, but also as a nation of South Africa, just to send a message which is that, yes, these are men and women in uniform. Yes, they are discharging their responsibilities. But yes, they are people who come from those communities, who at the end of the day, when they take off that uniform, they must go back to those communities. And therefore, it is not necessary that when you see a man or a woman in uniform, that you should walk up and provoke the man or woman in uniform. It's absolutely not necessary. Because we're not fighting here a visible war, we are fighting an invisible, I'm using COVID-19 as an example, an invisible enemy. And ours is to build a partnership between ourselves and the communities we serve. And therefore, there's no need for the communities as well, when they see the men and women in uniform, there's no need for them to feel intimidated by their presence or feel like we don't need these people. They are there to provide protection to all of us. I am not saying they are always right, but I think that as South African citizens, we also have responsibility. And one of the responsibilities we have is to conduct civic education and actually assist our children to understand that the man or a woman in uniform, whether Metro, whether African Police Service, whether a member of the Defense Force, those are not your enemies. These are people who are supposed to protect you. These are people who in the country have a responsibility of protecting the communities and the nation at large. So I'm just saying, honorable member, the responsibility lies amongst all of us. It's a societal responsibility to educate our people to understand and appreciate the role which is played by law enforcement agencies. And I think members of parliament too should be in the forefront of doing that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Malika.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question to the Minister is whether there is a clear outline indicating how SANDF members are integrated into SAPS and how they should enforce the lockdown rules. Is the ministry convinced that SANDF members understand this? Thank you.
Okay. How the SANDF works together with the South African Police Service? Is that the question? If it is the question, Chair, yes. I mean, remember, once the president took the decision that there will be a state of disaster management, there's a disaster in the country, immediately, government put together what is called net joints, which is a structure which is always there, but the difference this time is that the net joints has been expanded to include director generals from all government departments which deal with issues of COVID. Now, the planning for deployment of soldiers and the police is done at that level. The planning is informed by the intelligence services, for instance, who are also part of the net joints. The planning on who, of course, gives the command. Remember, we are in support of the police. So even your command in a roadblock, it would be, for instance, a member of the police, and therefore the relationship is a very positive relationship. And by the way, I would assume that you have a choice. They working together in a situation at times which can be very dangerous, where you are vulnerable as men and women in uniform. You've got to work closely together. You've got to hold on to one another, and you have to defend and protect one another. So we work very closely because we understand what the vision of the country is. We understand why there is this mission, why there is this deployment, and that there is one enemy, and that one enemy is the invisible enemy called coronavirus. And therefore, what the police do and what the soldiers do is informed by that which they have been directed to do by the commander-in-chief through the decisions of cabinet, which is that you will go, you will enforce the law, you will make sure that our people do not move up and down, because we are trying to prevent the spread of the virus. So everything they do stems from a mandate that has been given to them by that command. So they work closely together. We have not had tensions whatsoever. Thank you. And anyway, there's no need for tensions. They need one another. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next question will come from Honorable Labuskachne, and the name of William Okam falls off because I've already had Select.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I want to ask the Honourable Minister in her answer to Honourable Mugelaki's question. She said he must bring her the cases, the 33 cases that he is aware of. I just want to remind the Minister that she was on record at the end of April saying herself that there are 33 cases. So, Minister, or you are confused today, or you were confused that day. And then I would also like to say that in your explanation of the role of the soldiers and their conduct, are you actually saying that these people, that the civilians provoke the soldiers? Is that what you're saying? Thank you.
The last part, Chair. What's the last part? That enough what? Sorry?
Chairperson?
Please repeat your question.
That's the last one, yeah.
Chairperson, I said in her explanation on the behavior of soldiers or people in uniform, is the Minister actually saying that these people, the civilians, provoked the soldiers? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Labuskachne. Thank you, Chair. Honorable Member, it is not all civilians. And it is a small number, a fraction of people who, when they see law enforcement agencies, provoke them. And we have seen this. We've seen this on social media, like everything which is being circulated. We have even seen, which we've not talked to, a brutal attack on a woman metro officer by a community, unprovoked. Now, I think the reality is there in South Africa sometimes that whereas in the past when you saw a police, you saw a soldier, you became anxious and sometimes you insult them because of what they stood for. You still have, unfortunately, that kind of mentality amongst some of the people, that when you see a person who is a law enforcement agent, whether police or South African National Defence Force or Metro, those are people who are a threat to the community, when they are not a threat to the community, but are there to protect the community. So hence my response to that matter. So it is a reality. We've seen it. We have seen it. And when it is all over, I think if there will ever be a time when it will be over with regards to this COVID-19, hopefully the honorable members at times will then find it upon themselves to interact with the men and women in uniform and listen to what their experiences are, both good and bad, so that you have an understanding of a person who's in uniform, who's standing in the street in a roadblock at 12 midnight, that group of people. Sometimes what happens as they are standing there, what reality is that you do have people who simply provoke the law enforcement agents. It's not something we should deny. And of course, that provocation as well should not justify abuse of power by the law enforcement agencies. We have said when you are provoked, just walk away from it. Respond appropriately, talk to the person, nudge the person not to do it, use persuasion, and not use force to prevent all of that which is happening. I mean, if a person throws a potato at your face, and we say to the soldiers, they'll throw a potato at your face because you are a soldier. But what should you, are you going to take out a gun and shoot? And by the way, one of the things we should all be saying here, amongst others, Chair, is that we've not had a situation where police, soldiers have taken out and fired ammunition on civilians during this period, in spite of all of the challenges which have been there. But there's not a single soldier who has taken out a firearm and shot at a civilian in this period of COVID.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. We'll now move on to question number 19, asked by Honorable Nita to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Justice.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Sure, as we get the Minister to respond, we note that the questions to the Minister of Defense have been completed, and therefore I'm sure all of you will agree with me that the Minister is free to remain with us or depart and attend to other duties and responsibilities. But now let's move on to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairperson, and all honorable members.
Now it's justice, not police.
Please proceed, the Minister.
Thank you,
Services.
Yes, the justice sector, including the judiciary, continue to make substantial contribution into the government's endeavor to combat gender-based violence and femicide, as well as in measures to protect women and children, primarily in respect of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development and the National Prosecuting Authority. These commitments come, therefore, in terms of the sexual offences courts, which continue to yield high conviction rates. To date, 102 sexual offences courts have been rolled out across all provinces, together with 55 Tutuzela care centers attached to them. These specialized courts are equipped with upgraded technology to provide private testifying services, particularly for children, persons with mental disabilities, and traumatized witnesses. The Tutuzela care centers, which are one-stop care facility based in hospital premises, provide support services for victims of sexual offenses with an aim to reduce secondary victimization. During the 2019-20 financial year, 35,469 victims were assisted in the Tutuzela care centers. with 31,807 being specifically in relation to sexual offences across the country, and processes are underway to expand to 6 more sites within the current medium-term expenditure framework period. Furthermore, Chairperson, in line with the Presidential Summit Declaration and the GBF National Strategic Plan, the department promulgated regulations relating to sexual offences courts, which were gazetted in February 2020. The regulations set out support services intended to create a justice system that is quick, responsive, caring, and effective for victims of sexual offences. In addition, the department has commenced much of gender-based violence and against children under consideration, namely the Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Bill to among others, introduce stricter bail and sentencing conditions or provisions, the Domestic Violence Amendment, which seeks to address the gaps and anomalies which have manifested themselves since the Domestic Violence Act came into operation in 1999. The Criminal Law Sexual Offences Related Matters Amendment Bill, which seeks to extend the protection afforded to victims of gender-based violence and introduce a new offense of incest. These bills, Chairperson, will come into the next cycle of Cabinet, and we intend to introduce them as soon as Cabinet has approved them in that next cycle. The lockdown has had an impact on the inmates is dire as postponements of cases results in prolonged jail time, and this put additional strain on the overcrowded correctional facilities. To ameliorate this challenge, the courts continue to prioritize cases where accused persons are in custody. The accused persons are also being brought to the courts as means of reviewing the bail circumstances in terms of Section 3A of the Criminal Procedure Act that relates to offenders who have been granted bail but cannot afford. Yes, cases which were and continue to be struck off the roll due to the lockdown are continuously being reviewed and re-enrolled in accordance with the priority court role that every court must compile. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Nita, any follow-up question?
Let me thank Chair the response from the Minister. It was a very informative response and well presented, Chair. Chair, my follow-up question would be, Chair, and also as means of also making a proposal to the Minister, is there any interaction of partnership between the Department of Education in a view to explore a possible way of putting together a curriculum, especially that would focus on gender-based violence, Chair, in early childhood centers, starting there, Chair, and also primary school and high schools? Is just a question, is there a thinking between the two departments in terms of addressing the issue of gender-based violence at an early stage? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. There is a working together and collaboration between the department and the Department of Justice of Basic Education, because the Department of Basic Education is a member of the Director General's Intersectoral Committee on Child Justice as prescribed by Section 9(6) of the Child Justice Act. This committee is chaired by the DG of Justice and Constitutional Development and is tasked by the Act to give oversight in the implementation of the of the Child Justice Act. Every year, the DPE submits annual reports on child justice, which I table in Parliament. So I think within that context and that forum, we can be able to look into the matter that the Honorable Mita is raising in terms of the development of the curriculum for basic education, including for early childhood development, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll then move on to supplementary questions by Honorable Arnolds, Muimang, and Shackleton. We'll start with Arnolds.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I ask the Minister to make use of the interpretation services, please?
I'm sure the Minister is more or less ready.
Kan ek voortgaan, voorzitter? Baie dankie.
Minister, are you happy? Okay, let's proceed.
Okay,
I could not get the question.
He may speak in Afrikaans. He may speak in Afrikaans.
Thank you.
Also make sure that we don't lose
Baie
any
dankie.
of the messages that will be articulated. Arnold.
Baie dankie. Die minister gereed is. I just want to make sure if the minister is ready with the interpretation services.
No, I'm not.
Okay, then it's fine, Minister. Thank you. Minister, it is clear that in South Africa, in our country, that gender-based violence is also a crisis. And the President, in his State of the Nation address in 2019, has also raised sharply the issues of gender-based violence. And then there was promises made about bringing and strengthening the emergency teams and bringing together all the resources in terms of the departments, police, social services, health, justice, and education together to deal effectively with gender-based violence, violence against women and children. And we all know that the government's responsibility is to protect its citizens. So you have also mentioned now the 3 bills that is currently there, but you can have good laws, but if there is no strict implementation of those laws and seeing that perpetrators get behind jail, that laws also will mean nothing. So my question to you is, since 2019, when the announcements was made about emergency services, emergency responses, and now with the COVID-19 in this current situation where we have seen an increase in gender-based violence, what is your take on this now? Is there any impact in terms of what the justice system has done so far to protect those vulnerable women and children? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I do think that there is an impact because when you look at the collaboration between the working of the NPA, the police, and the Tutuzela care centers, it has also helped in regard to the conviction rate. And in society as we speak, you can pinpoint direct conviction almost every day that are being churned out by the courts. As an example, on the 24th of June 2020, a 31-year-old man from Nyakalo Township in Allen Ridge was sentenced to 36 years imprisonment after he pleaded guilty in a plea and sentence agreements on 2 counts of housebreaking with an intent to rob, robbery, and 2 counts of rape by the Free State High Court. And on the 25th of June, the Port Elizabeth High Court sentenced Zukile July 25 to life imprisonment for raping and sodomizing his then 30-year-old and strange wife. And Chairperson, on the 24th, the Weinberg Magistrate Court sentenced a man, his mother, and the aunt of his victim on charges of rape and human trafficking to a collective 8 years imprisonment. This is subsequent to their conviction on several charges, including rape, human trafficking, kidnapping, and assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. So I'm just giving these examples, Chairperson, to show that on a day-to-day basis, the courts do convict perpetrators of these heinous crimes through the work that is being done by the NPA and the police. And then after the announcement by the president, the interministerial committee is working very hard to fast track and ensure that there are interventions on many of these issues. And I think as the Minister of Police come, you will also hear in the number of arrests that in the judicial process. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mwima.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good day, Minister and members. Honorable Minister, the uneasiness from the vulnerable women and children with the pending release of prisoners with the sole purpose of mitigating the spread and containing COVID-19 in our prison. How do we ensure that those convicted and sentenced for this abuse do not get released by mistake? Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Member. We, as you may be aware, is that one of the conditions for its release for this COVID-19 special dispensation, parole special dispensation, is that you should not be convicted of any offenses related to gender-based violence, sexual offenses, which was put as a precondition. And the process has been meticulous to the extent that all the inmates, as they go through this process, we are expected that they must go through a DNA process, which also help us to verify data. They also, the SAPS also participate in the process, and also the current situation and issues of social distancing. But we have put checks and balances to avoid any error that could or may occur. And if an error does occur, we act immediately to rectify. But I can state up to so far that we are able to deal with this without a lot of errors in that regard to mistakenly release those that are convicted of the above mentioned crimes that are included in the special parole dispensation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Shackleton.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm a special delegate from the Gauteng Provincial Legislature today. Thank you very much for recognizing me through you, Chair, to the Honorable Minister of Justice. President Ramaphosa, almost a year ago, safety of women. We are going to, as a matter of urgency, make the necessary amendments to our laws and policies to ensure that which amendments to law to this effect to date have been tabled before Parliament, not before Cabinet or drafted, but actually tabled by his department in the last year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Today we have made various amendments that are before Parliament that relates to patriarchy, dismantling of patriarchy, including issues of rape. For example, the national that relates to the removal of a prescription period of 20 years that was there that a person who had committed an offense of rape cannot be charged if it was done 20 years ago. That a bill has been passed by the National Assembly, and I think it will be coming to this House soon. Hopefully, we concluded with no delay. The other one relates to the spouses in a customary marriage, that they should have equal kind of protection and sharing in the assets of that marriage. So this also goes into dealing with issues of patriarchy and creating an equal society. And as I've said already, there are bills before cabinet, and as you will be aware, Chairperson, before cabinet can release a bill, there are processes of consultation, which we have now undertaken also with the society, including civil society. The only last process that is there is the cycle of cabinet, which we are fast-tracking to conclude. And when you look at the date, you will then realize, Chairperson, that these bills are put on a fast-track mode and process, and we are of the view that we will be able to table them without any further delay upon the conclusion of that process by cabinet.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the next question. And the next question is question number 44, asked by Honorable Mikalakis, directed to the Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The question relates to overcrowding, and the rate of imprisonment in our country for both sentenced and awaiting trial offenders is increasing at a rate that surpasses our rate of developing new infrastructure. Our prison population is largely constituted by those from disadvantaged backgrounds, more in particular young black males. Budget constraints continue to be a challenge in developing new infrastructure, and the old infrastructure is also a challenge in providing effective rehabilitation programs in old prison buildings. We are also examining the criminal justice system in areas such as sentencing, so that incarceration does not become the only option for such inmates, particularly those of short-term sentences. We have started to review some of our policies, and we are looking forward to a thoughtful contribution which will emanate from public debates through the legislation processes that together we can address overcrowding challenge in our correctional centers. However, it should be noted that overcrowding in general has consequences amongst others, including minimizing available bed space, hampering maintenance of infrastructure, negatively impacting health conditions of inmates, impending security management of inmates, increasing gang mobilization and activities, reduced safety of officials, and capacity of officials to render development and rehabilitation programs for offenders is also affected. In an effort to meet our rehabilitation obligations, the department has forged partnership with various organizations and departments. This assists us in order to meet the mandate to effectively rehabilitate those that have been sentenced. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mikalakis, any follow-up question?
Of course, thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable Minister, actually the short answer to my question, which was, what is the effect of overcrowding on the rehabilitation of prisoners? The short answer to that, if I listen to you correctly, is that overcrowding makes rehabilitation almost impossible under the current circumstances. I have asked this question for the last 6 years. And since 2014, I get a string from whoever is the Minister of Justice. I get a string of things that you are going to do to address overcrowding and to make the rehabilitation process more effective. But nothing happens. Among others, because of, as you said, budget constraints. But Minister, rehabilitation should be your first priority as correctional services. If the Minister agrees that overcrowding negatively affects rehabilitation, should the problem of overcrowding not have been dealt with by now? And do you agree then, Minister, that it would be impossible to rehabilitate any inmate effectively for as long as the problem of overcrowding persists? Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you, Chairperson. The challenge of overcrowding is not only, it cannot only be resolved by correctional services. It's a challenge that needs the entire system, firstly from society, where we must have reduced people get convicted. We are obliged constitutionally to put these people into our centers and to put them through the rehabilitation program. That is the first thing. The second one is what I've already mentioned, Chairperson, that also the issue of sentencing people to prison, that, for example, might have been sentenced to less than 2 years. Research does indicate that those that stay for less, six weeks, 6 months, and so forth, it doesn't help us with the program of rehabilitation. And that also relates to the NPA, to the judiciary's attitude in terms of sentencing. And lastly, Chairperson, it does affect our rehabilitation program, the huge number of overcrowding. But we have to do with what we have, and what we have, we do have programs that are aimed to deal with this issue of rehabilitation. And we can show successes, that there is a number of successes of people that have been released from our facilities who are very good ambassadors. A huge number of them do contribute positively to society and also economically. But there are obviously those that do and go out and commit heinous crimes, and those then becomes the examples, Chairperson. And our preliminary reports indicates that the most of those who reoffend are those that have stayed short in our facilities. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Dango.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Minister, obviously you've stated that the rate of conviction and the rate of prisons will not match. There will always be more convictions at this point in time than the facilities available. Isn't it time that we looked at a different kind of sentencing for short-term offenders, such as community service? The next time the Honorable Mikalakis speeds in the Free State is not sentenced to prison. He's sentenced to do some community service somewhere. Thank you, Minister.
Yes, Minister. Thank you, Honorable. I agree that that is what we should look into, and some of the initiatives that are being debated out there are aimed at that, but also the sufficient training and engagements of the NPA, including the presiding officers, will also help. And it is for that reason that we have developed a habit of taking the new appointed magistrates to some of these correctional facilities to understand the circumstances, the conditions, and also to understand overcrowding, so that when they do sentence the inmates, they know which conditions they are sentencing them to. And particularly for these kind of short-term offenses, there could be a platform where they are sentenced to community corrections, to do community service, to replant, and do many other things that will be of good positive aid to society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nana.
The 10th Chairperson Minister, I'm sure you by now know that your department doesn't really have a good track record when it comes to rehabilitation and overcrowding in your facilities. Will the minister agree that his department is still in violation of human rights as reflected in the Cameron report? And secondly, that your department is still not complying with the UN Mandela rules? Thanks, Chair.
We note, Honorable Nana, that you continue to have your head on. These are some of the things I think that we need to look at and finalize as the House. So we know that. Honorable Minister.
No problem, Chairperson. I'll be waiting.
Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. It has been proven since 1994 that
Minister is not audible.
Prisons to community correction. I don't know why, Chairperson, but I'm unmuted. I'm not sure if members can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, thank you. It has been proven, Chairperson, that the department is transiting from prisons to corrections. And there are various laws to that effect to help us with issues of corrections. Hence, we're now speaking about rehabilitation and so forth. And there will, from time to time, be challenges, as the honorable member raises from the Cameroon reports. There are various other reports that will come from time to time. But the department is a signatory to the UN Nelson Mandela rules. We are not only a signatory, but we're in the forefront to reshape the rules and the standards and the minimum standards of treatment of inmates across the globe. And it is clear, Chairperson, that also with the safeguards that were put of the inspectorate, the department does comply with the human rights standard as expected by the Constitution. But the challenges, they arise from time to time. And as they arise, we attend to resolve the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mtsanai.
Thanks, Chairperson. Minister, the rehabilitation programs within the centers. But the image after the rehabilitation program, social worker, rehabilitation. Because banally criminal records. And another one question, Minister, if changa ne setse ba di agile tsa gore batho ba eleng gore ba reipa ba bola bo mme ba rona ka montle ba kgona go nna ba nosi ba sa kgone go kopana le batho ba ba tshwaretseng go utswa di-chicken le di-sweets tse
just make sure that is unmuted.
Release about to Baba Soretum petty crime and
yes. Let's please try and assist them to ensure that Ntama is audible. But I'm sure the kernel and the essence of what he was raising has been communicated. Minister.
Yes, Honorable Chairperson. Indeed, this. Honorable Chairperson, the first question asked by Honorable Mutsamai is true. That offenders or ex-offenders, they face difficulties in society to get or gain employment. And I must state, Chairperson, that there is no law that prevent ex-inmates from getting a job, or from employers employing ex-inmates. But the employers, they create an impression as if it's something illegal for them to do, which we have had many attempts to clarify that it is not illegal. In fact, it is allowed to employ ex-inmates. But the other challenge is that even in some institutions, you will obviously find that they've made it some kind of a strict policy not to employ. So this is a conversation we need to continuously have with employers to give ex-inmates a chance. Those that have run these programs and they qualify for the jobs. The second question about the separation and so forth, it's something that we are obviously dealing with in terms of the mediums B, A, and C. And as Honorable Mzamai is aware, that the maximums are mostly the ones where the high risk or those that have been sentenced for long term are usually placed. But because the number of those because of the minimum sentence regime, the number is growing and the space has become very scarce. We are sometimes forced to allow a mixture of these, but only with the medium kind of inmates. The last question, I could not get it clearly, Chairperson, but maybe he was asking what processes were put in place in releasing people of petty crimes, and so that's the only thing I could hear, but I could not hear it clearly. But all the people that are being released through this program of the special dispensation are going through community corrections for integration with society. Thank you. Chairperson, I can't hear you. I can't hear anything. I think maybe you might still be muted.
Deputy Chair, are you there?
Thank you very much.
Chair, are you there? Thanks.
Thank you very much. The next question is question 37, asked by Honorable Detroit, directed to the Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the extent to which modernization and digitization of the justice system broadly has lagged behind. In the same breath, the pandemic has presented opportunities to maximize the use of technology in the courts, thereby forcing all of us to have an active role in making the fourth industrial revolution, and thus making it an important adventure globally. In respect of criminal trials, honorable members may be aware, we have provided in the directions we gazetted under the regulations of the Disaster Management Act that postponements of cases be made through audiovisual links where they have been installed. The solution is available at 47 courts, which are linked to 18 correctional facilities across the country, out of more than 750 courts. Thousands of cases are postponed through the link. It is for that reason that we are rolling out this audio-visual link solution to additional centers and courts. Unopposed bail applications are also heard through the audio-visual link. We are also developing a remote audio court interpretation solution that will enable court interpretation services to be provided remotely, especially in respect of foreign language interpretation. Where there is no audio-visual link installed between a correctional center and a court, other alternative audio-visual links such as teleconference or video conference or any other electronic mode continue to be utilized or exploited. Similarly, courts make use of technology in respect of civil cases, and even extensively than in respect of criminal cases. These include agent motion application, ex parte application, uncontested divorce cases. These are done through the various virtual platforms such as Microsoft Teams, the Zoom platform we're in, and other virtual platforms. The rules board is working on including each high court and the magistrate court rules to further delivery and hearings to the public comment. That will finalize. It's also important for members to note that development in the ICT space calls for the increased connectivity, the far-flung rural areas, and the experience of challenges in this regard.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, thank you for your detailed response. Honourable Minister, my first supplementary question is I'd like to know if the Minister can indicate how many cases couldn't go ahead because of the lockdown since March 2020. And secondly, as a result of these cases being postponed, obviously the inmates are under your care or under correctional services care. What is the grand value of the additional time for these inmates to be spent there to look after them? Basically, how much additional money was spent to look after the inmates as a result of the postponement of their cases? Thank you, Minister.
Minister. Thank you, Chairperson. I think with regard to the two questions, we are still consolidating all the reports and the stats that relates to that, but there is a process that is being spearheaded from the NPA and the judiciary to ensure the prioritization of the cases that were affected during this period. And that will also give us the clear stats and the picture of those that were affected. And also is also the same with regard to the rent value and the amount that it has cost us to keep some of the people during this difficult period. We are still in consolidation, Chairperson. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Honourable Chairperson.
Yes.
Could I ask if when those statistics has been consolidated, that it be sent through to us in writing?
Yeah, I'm sure we can note that.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you, Minister.
We'll think about it here. Honourable Labuskane.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, the Chief Justice has, as far back as 2014, called for an electronic court filing system. What are the reasons for it taking so long? And in light of the fact that in magistrate courts, the court files disappear all the time, should e-filing not have been prioritized?
Minister. Thank you, Chairperson. In fact, Cabinet took a decision in 2008 for an integrated justice management system, which includes the complete modernization of the entire cluster, including the court operations, which also relates to the issues of e-filing and the whole modernization, connectivity across the country, and so forth. And I must state that there have been challenges. It is an issue that has been prioritized, and it's an issue that we continue to grapple with, to turn around the situation, to ensure that it does happen in the high courts and also in the magistrates courts, including the issue of connectivity that I spoke about, which we are currently also working with CETA to help us in the various courts of our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. George Mikalakis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, the Integrated Justice Management System, as you say, 2008, it's been 12 years in the making. I honestly think that it's high time that this system is actually functional to a large extent, which we don't to ask you with regards to your IT systems. You have indicated in a written reply recently that the Department of Justice makes use of the system infrastructure that is provided by CETA. In my opinion, this is not nearly good enough to ensure that sensitive information that is being dealt with in the court proceedings of the public is actually protected satisfactorily. As a provider is perhaps not the most ideal. Have you been considering alternatives, and how are you going to fund this entire project in light of the financial constraints to make sure that sensitive information in the courts do not find their way into the wrong hands? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Indeed, 12 years is a long period, but there are things we can point in that 12 years. There is a pilot project happening in Gauteng related to case line, and I know honorable member will be aware with regard to this. And also there are various programs, including the Home Affairs identification program of harms, which emanates from this IJS program, the modernization in the police, and also at correctional services. So there is something that we can point a Chairperson. It's not like the whole 12 years went to waste. There is something that happened. It's just that we're saying it's not enough. We're still lagging behind. We need to move faster and ensure that there is complete modernization to the satisfaction of society, so that society can then see the benefits of the modernization project. And with regard to funding, obviously there is going to be a reprioritization, as the Minister of Finance has said, and obviously there will still be challenges within that regard. But we still have a minimum funding that will help us to forge forward with the program of modernization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, we are aware that before lockdown, the backlog of cases was already a major problem. And we also realize that COVID-19 could not have been foreseen. But Minister, please could you indicate to us how you will ensure that this additional backlog is effectively addressed, and if the past backlog on its own seems impossible to deal with?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. As the Chairperson indicated already, that there is a team through the judiciary, the NPA, and the relevant stakeholders in the administration of justice process that is looking at all the backlogs that are in the courts, including the ones that have emanated as the results of COVID-19. And a prioritization program has been put in place to fast track and facilitate the speedy processes that relates to most of the cases that are affected by the backlog. And a clear, detailed kind of response and program will soon be put in place that will enable this to function. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is question number 20, asked by Honorable Nita, directed to the Minister. Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The following measures are outlined in the DCS Human Resource Directives that the department has put in place consideration of fair and transparent alternative placement or redeployment of officials to different roles or responsibilities. Such alternative placement are done in consultation with the officials concerned. Considerations are given to placing vulnerable officials in the back office where there are low risks for them to be infected, while those still fit or strong could be considered for frontline placement. In other words, this relates to mainly placing restrictions for such officials to do certain high-risk duties, for example, guarding of inmates in the public hospitals. Stricter physical distancing protocols, such as staggering of shifts of flexi hours, where such officers are allowed to report for duty a bit later, are also encouraged. We have encouraged regions to allow flexi hours with intervals of between 15 and 30 minutes during reporting for duty, with a view that those with comorbidities could be allowed to report later than everyone else. Furthermore, limiting the duration of close interactions with colleagues or the public is an option that managers are encouraged to consider for the colleagues under discussion. Lastly, consideration is given to allowing the employees to work from home if they are provided with the necessary tools of business, such as the laptops and internet access. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, any follow-up?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much again to the Minister, Chair. What I would like to know from the Minister is there an interaction with the union involved in the institution of correctional service in terms of them understanding the regulations so that their membership and also individuals within that are not unionized? Are they aware of such regulations so that there is no challenge of those that are saying they do not know what to do? We find ourselves in a situation where people, they just abandon the place of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, there is interaction with the relevant union on this issue in particular and the various issues affecting the employees to ensure that everyone understands where we are, including training on the directives and the regulations and continuous consultation with the employees affected and concerned. There is a Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, George Mikalakis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, I've got a simple yes-no question for you. Minister, at least 16 citizens have died in prison due to COVID-19. Would this number have been lower if overcrowding was not an issue?
Thank you, Chairperson. Across the globe, there are inmates or officials that died in facilities due to COVID-19. There is no hard and fast rule or a clear, good reference across the globe. But from our perspective and view, is that even if we had 10 inmates across the country, we will still be affected by COVID-19. So there is no one who is immune from this, from any quarter. And when you look at the numbers in the country, our percentage almost mirrors the situation in society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next question is question number 45. Tabled by Honorable Christians and directed to the Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. I must say that we were not sure exactly about the question, but we attempted to answer it. Hopefully, it is what the honorable member was trying to ask us. I wish to point out that at the outset that the question asked by the honorable member refers to the Child Justice Registry, and that the Child Justice Act does not provide for the development and maintenance of a register for child justice inquiries. Nonetheless, Chairperson, Section 961E of the Act provides for the establishment of an integrated information management system for the management and monitoring of cases involving children in conflict with the law through the child justice system. The department is in compliance with the latter section, establish an integrated case management system for child justice cases, which is a national repository of quantitative and qualitative data that traces cases of children from the entry to the exit points of the court system. It is a dashboard that provides disaggregated numerals to permit evidence-based analysis of trends and intervention, as well as the monitoring and evaluation of court performance in the management of these cases. Through the ICMS-CJ, the information from the South African Police Services, National Prosecuting Authority, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, and the Legal Aid South Africa is uploaded on a transversal platform and thereby shared across the departments and entities in the criminal justice value chain. It is important to acknowledge, though, that the ICMS-CJ is not without challenges. The system experiences challenges which vary from data discrepancies, inaccuracy, to data incompleteness, some of which have been raised by the Auditor General in the previous financial audit reports. The Director General Intersectoral Committee established in terms of the Act are addressing these challenges, Chairperson. The Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster has also identified the establishment of an integrated information management system as a priority focus of the cluster through its integrated justice system project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Christians. Any follow-up questions?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Chairperson and Minister. Apologies for the slight confusion there. My question really was about the Child Protection Register. However, thank you very much for the added information, for the additional information that you've given us there. That was very valuable as well. As I said, the question was really about the Child Protection Register. So my question will be different to the response that you've given us. My question is as follows. In the last 7 years, only 662 names were added to the register. Despite the fact that we all know the number of offenders are much, much higher. This means the register has been unable to fix this problem for the last 7 years now. Minister, this poses a huge risk for our already vulnerable women and children. Why has this problem not been urgently addressed? And who is responsible for addressing the fixing of the Child Protection Register? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. We, as I've stated earlier on, that we wanted to state what we are responsible for. The Child Protection Register is an instrument administered by the Department of Social Development. So I think that question will be more appropriate for them to be able to respond. We can take the question and forward it to them, or the honorable members can ask when social development does come to this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Boshoff. to be followed by Shaik, to be followed by Nana.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, in a previous question today, you have indicated that you've had interactions with the Department of Education with regard to the Child Protection Register. But what I would like to know is indicate to us today what measures have you, together with the Department of Education, put in place to ensure that all educators are vetted prior to being appointed to positions as educators? As the South African Council of Educators indicated in 2018 that they would be ready in 2019 to add any sexual abuse perpetrators to this register. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. The indication I provided with regard to the Department of Education is relations to the Child Justice Act, where the Department of Education also participate in the forum. And it was on a question by Honorable Ngita whether we are planning to have some kind of awareness and educational programs with the Department of Education in that regard. So I am also in this regard, the question will also be better placed with the Department of Social Development, particularly with regard to the collaboration in terms of the Child Protection Registrar and the Department of Education not employing those that appear in the register, because it's only that custodian department that have got access to that registrar, Chairperson. As you are aware, that information is not yet made available to us. So it's only social development that can help in that regard.
Thank you very much, Shaik.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, as you pointed out that the department has an integrated case management system for child justice cases, if you can perhaps give us an indication of how many child offenders or juveniles are captured in the system, and whether child offenders have also benefited from the mass release of prisoners, and will the department facilitate their smooth reintegration into our society? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Minister?
Thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the juvenile facilities, indeed, the juveniles will benefit from the current parole dispensation, some of them, and up to so far, about 23 of them have benefited countrywide in terms of the number. And in terms of the juveniles across the country, we have got a total number of about 3,780 that are awaiting trial or remand detainees. And those that have been sentenced are about 1,510. So that is the number that we currently have across the system in terms of a consolidated number of those that are still within the system in the pipeline for the courts, and those that have already been in sentence for our own facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dana, Honorable Dana.
Sorry, Chair, I'm sure you didn't take notice. I did take my hand down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is question number 33, asked by Honorable Todovu, directed to the Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. I see Honorable Nana has been able to take his hand down, but he is still awaiting guidance to take his head down. The question about Honorable Todovu is that, yes, the minimum... Yes, Chairperson, there is minimum progress has been made due to the process to be followed when releasing sentence offenders on parole. On 11 May 2020, the department began with the process to release selected low-risk offenders, and initial releases started from 20 May 2020. As at 19 June 2020, the total number of offenders released was at 3,557. Prior to the release, the total population was 154,943 sentenced, and 101,928 were sentenced, and 53,015 remand detainees and other unsentenced inmates, which translated into a total population of 30.68 of a population, which made social distancing difficult. After the recent release, as at 24 June 2020, inmate population was at 147,922, consisting of 95,154 sentence offenders and 52,763 remand detainees and other unsentenced inmates, which translates to 24.75 overcrowding level, which is there is a reduction of about 6%. And in terms of breakdown of provinces of the number that has been released, 315 male in the Eastern Cape and 14 females is the total number is 329. Gauteng, 666 males and 64 females, the total number 730. KwaZulu-Natal, 802, 80 females, 882 total. Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Northwest, 515 male, 50 females, 565 total. Free State and Northern Cape, 584 males, 50 females, 634. Western Cape, 877 males, 62 females, 939. On the second question, Chairperson, yes, plans have been made to integrate such inmates back into society to avoid reoffending. A phased-in approach stretching over a period of 10 weeks to allow for a proper consideration of the qualifying offenders. The special parole dispensation do not qualify for automatic placement. A normal parole consideration processes is being undertaken, and the parole boards will, among others, take factors that minimize the risks into account during the considerations of the process. The qualifying offenders will be placed into system of community corrections to continue serving their sentences and comply with the set conditions of placement. The department has the capacity to consider offenders and place those who qualify. As indicated, only low-risk offenders who meet all the requirements and the conditions for placement on parole will be placed on this parole program. The requirement that only offenders who have undergone relevant rehabilitation programs aimed at addressing their offending behavior will qualify for placement, as this will minimize the risk of reoffending. There are two additional requirements for placements on parole, including taking of the fingerprints and the DNA samples for comparison with the South African Police Service database as a prerequisite for placement. Every qualifying sentence offender's profile will be assessed and considered individual by the parole boards before they make their recommendation for placement on parole. This will include affording victims the opportunity to make representation why an offender should not be placed on parole. All relevant factors will be taken into consideration during this process, which will include any prior conviction for violent offenses committed. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honorable Kadovo, do you have any follow-up questions? Honorable Dodovu.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson.
Okay.
Yeah, apologies. It seems Honorable Dodovu has been kicked out of the system again. Chairperson, Minister, while we appreciate the 6% reduction in occupancy in the prisons, my follow-up question is whether this mass release has been communicated with victims. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. The process of the parole boards include them communicating with the victims, placing their views on whether the offenders should be released on parole or not. This process has, however, been complicated by the current period of social distancing, where the department is now forced to use electronic means, including telephone calls to the victims, which is found mostly by the victims to be a very cold way of engaging on these kind of difficult issues, which needs empathy, which needs some kind of person-to-person contact. And this has really delayed us in this project. But however, the department is soldiering on and at least making the victims to understand the conditions of social distancing and the current situation we're in the country. That necessitates or force us to communicate with the victims through electronic platforms. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. George Milakis.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, rehabilitation entails a bit more than just teaching skills and a bit more than just ticking the boxes that is required by the parole board. It requires that the individual needs to be rehabilitated to such an extent that he or she can be reintegrated into society as a responsible individual that will hopefully make a contribution to society thereafter. In light of this comment, Chairperson and Minister, would the Minister agree that the release of these inmates was a desperate attempt to relieve prisons of some of its overcrowding in light of COVID-19, but there are no guarantees that inmates will go back to circumstances suitable to preventing reoffending? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. I won't agree with that because this measure has been advised by the United Nations and countries across the globe have been advised to reduce their population to enable the management of the virus in the various correctional centers or prisons across the globe to be practically possible. And it is not a knee-jerk kind of a program, as you will have seen that it is done thoroughly through the parole boards, the DNA sampling, the working with the SAPS, and using various experts to deal and advise on the issues of rehabilitation, whether the offender has undergone that program. And most of it, it has been found that some of them who are left with a period of 2 years and so forth have gone sufficient processes of rehabilitation, Chairperson. Thank you.
No, that's fine. No, thank you very much, Matebula.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Apologies for not switching off on my video because of network in my area. Minister, lava ku tiva ku ka number leya 551 yi hlanganisiwe na ti-province tin'wana or ya Limpopo ntsena na?
Chairperson, number 551. Oh, ya lava ka huma eLimpopo.
Yes.
Oh, na yi hlanganisiwe eka correctional service region yin'we Limpopo iphathi ya region ya Mpumalanga na Northwest. So kuva region ya 1. So 515 le ihlanganisa Mpumalanga na ihlanganisa na Mpumalanga na Northwest ayi province ya Limpopo tsena. So enhlamulo ka xivutiso xa honorable member iku ya intiyiso swi hlanganile.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nita.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I missed in the minister's presentation when he was outlining the criteria used for the parole. If they do include those women that have young children, I understand that one of the issues that he highlighted is that all those that are implicated in gender-based violence, they were not given the parole. But I would like to know what is the status of those that have young children in their institutions. Thanks.
Yes, Chairperson, it does include those with infants in the correctional facilities, and the criteria is that the women are also prioritized in the parole dispensation. They are the ones who are expected or allowed to go quicker in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next question is question number 40, asked by Honorable Mikilakis to the Minister. Minister. Question 40.
Yeah, I'm just getting it, Chairperson.
Question 40, Chair, is for the Minister of Police.
Police, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it's not my question, Chairperson.
No.
You see,
take the opportunity to thank the Minister for having come to respond to our questions and express a wish that in future we will continue to interact and deepen the engagement. But then move on. I guess what we can do at this point.
Honorable Chair, can I rise on the matter that I put before the table staff?
Yes.
I've requested the table staff to indicate to you, Honorable Chair, that we take a comfort break and come back either 1:45 or at 2 exactly, so that we proceed with our business with the next ministers that are supposed to take questions.
Yes, perhaps that's really appropriate, honorable members. That at this point we take a comfort break and come back at 2 p.m. Come back at 2. And Honorable Ngwenya, in terms of facilitating, will take us also Honorable Lucas at 2 will take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's thank the Minister once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and all honorable members. It was an insightful.
Thank you, Minister Lamola. Thanks.
Members are advised not to log off, just so that they can rejoin the meeting. Thank you very much.